hold the phone here. Some solar and perhaps nuclear as well. Why would we need nuclear equipment for Mars colonization? Nuclear reactors are one thing, but if humans bring nukes to Mars, bro, we will clearly have learned nothing. Mars is like our saving grace. Mars is a chance for humans to start over and build something better. Interplanetary species, evolve the human race, leave a legacy behind. And we can't do that if we're exploding each other. You know what I mean? We just gotta work together. So I swear to God, if they bring nukes to Mars, we're chucked. Final straw for humanity. That's all I'm saying. What's good, guys? How are we doing today? My name is Dylan. Welcome back to episode 4 of Chillin with Dylan. And today I wanted to talk about the colonization of Mars. Big dog Elon Musk, he's busy buying Twitter as of late, but he still has plans to get humans to Mars by probably 2030. And a multiplanetary species would be sick. Let's do that. Before we start though, if you guys want to listen on Spotfiy, link is down below. I would appreciate it. Instagram, the Discord server, everything else is down below. Enough plugging. This is going to be a good episode. Let's get right to it. So Chillin with Dylan so far has been conspiracy theories and history, I guess. And we talked about how the moon landing wasn't fake in one of the episodes. So I guess colonization of Mars fits perfectly because it'd be sick. If we could be on Mars, if we could be on the moon, if we could leave the solar system, if we could just become Star Wars, you know what I mean? That's the end goal, obviously. Earth is going to die. The sun is going to explode in 5 billion years. We got to find some sort of viable solution or else humankind will just kind of go extinct. If we don't go extinct by underpopulation or nuclear war. You know what I mean? You never know. Humans are humans and they always fight for no reason. But so if you don't know, there's 9 planets in our solar system. Earth is a third away from the sun. Mercury's too close to the sun. Venus is absolute hell on Earth. Constant firestorms, lightning, wind. It's just awful. Volcanoes, literally hell. Jupiter, Saturn, too far away, also too huge. We would die instantly because of the gravity. Pluto, uninhabitable. Neptune, also a gas planet. And basically all of them are uninhabitable except for Mars, because Mars is like Earth. It's about, I think it's half the size of Earth. And they theorize that at one point in time, there could have been water on Mars, but also Mars is closer to us, but it's kind of like a deserted wasteland in a sense. Kind of reminds me of the planet that Luke was on when he started. I forget the name of it. You're going to kill me. Jakku? I don't remember, but it's basically that. It's just a desert, honestly. There's no water on it, at least that we know of yet. The atmosphere is thinner than ours, and it's not made up of oxygen, so we couldn't exactly breathe the air. But it's the only planet in our solar system that is relatively close to us that is also inhabitable. And as far as we can tell, wherever we can actually get to, it's the only one that's habitable. I've heard talks of maybe Saturn's moon Titan being habitable, but Mars is the safest bet. How are we going to live there? And how are we going to create oxygen? How are we going to refuel the ship to get back? Conditions on the surface of Mars are closer to the conditions on Earth in terms of temperature and sunlight than on any other planet or moon except for the cloud tops of Venus. So even though Venus is a hell, I guess you can live in the cloud tops. However, the surface is not hospitable to humans or most known life forms due to the radiation, greatly reduced air pressure, and an atmosphere with only 0.16% oxygen. So Mars' atmosphere has 0.16%, we have 0.21%. In 2012, it was reported that some lichen and cyanobacteria survived and showed remarkable adaptation capacity for photosynthesis after 34 days in simulated Martian conditions in the Mars Simulation Laboratory. So basically, they took these bacteria, put them in a Mars-like environment, and they survived for 34 days using photosynthesis. Some scientists think that bacteria could play a role in the development of self-sustainable crude outposts on Mars. They propose that cyanobacteria could be used directly for various applications, including the production of food, fuel, and oxygen. Products from their cultures could support the growth of other organisms, opening the way to a wide range of life support biological processes based on Martian resources. So if you're wondering, basically we could use bacteria to help us survive on Mars. But Mars still presents a hostile environment for human habitation. Different technologies have been developed to assist long-term space exploration and may be adapted for habitation on Mars. The existing record for the longest consecutive spaceflight is 438 days by cosmonaut Valery Polyakov, and the most accrued time in space is 878 days by Gennady Padalka. The longest time spent outside the protection of the Earth's Van Allen radiation belt is about 12 days for the Apollo 17 moon landing. This is minor in comparison to the 1,100-day journey to Mars and back, envisioned by NASA for possibly as early as the year 2028. Scientists have hypothesized that many different biological functions can be negatively affected by the environment of Mars colonies. Due to higher levels of radiation, there are a multitude of physical side effects that must be mitigated. In addition, Martian soil contains high levels of toxins which are hazardous to human health. I see all of this makes sense. You know, I honestly did not know that people were in space for 3 years. That's a long time. But it says there's some interesting physical side effects that must be mitigated first. First off, the difference in gravity may negatively affect human health by weakening bones and muscles. There's also risk of osteoporosis and cardiovascular problems. So boys, if we're going to Mars, ensure that you're drinking your milk so you don't get osteoporosis and doing your hard exercises so you don't have cardiovascular problems, obviously. Current rotations on the International Space Station put astronauts in zero gravity for 6 months, a comparable length of time to a one-way trip to Mars. This gives researchers the ability to better understand the physical state that astronauts going to Mars would arrive in. Once on Mars, surface gravity is only 38% of that on Earth. On Earth, blood within the body stays 70% below the heart. But in microgravity, this is not the case due to nothing pulling the blood down. This can have several negative effects. Once entering into microgravity, the blood pressure in the lower body and legs is significantly reduced. This causes legs to become weak through loss of muscle and bone mass. Basically, from all those big words and scientific things, the physical effects of not only being in space, but also in a place with less gravity than Earth is very bad because our bodies are not acclimatized to it. So not only can you get osteoporosis and cardiovascular problems, it actually weakens your bone mass and your muscle. So your legs become weaker. Because on Mars, if it's 30%, 38% of that on Earth, you can lift heavier things. Like I can lift this desk like nothing, but also I could bounce around sort of like the moon, but not as high, I think. I don't know how humans would be able to become acclimated to Mars atmosphere and gravity, but also how they'd be able to survive in space and then reacclimate on Mars and not die. You know what I mean? Because it says right here, during reacclimation on Earth, astronauts were observed to have a myriad of symptoms, including cold sweats, nausea, vomiting, and motion sickness. They also felt disoriented, and basically once they were on Mars, these health effects would be a serious concern. And I guess once you return to Earth, recovery from bone loss and atrophy is a long process, and the effects of microgravity may never fully reverse. Because like humans have lived on Earth, not primarily just that's all we've lived, you know? We've gone into space on the space station, we've gone to the moon, but like we're used to Earth. So going to Mars or going into space for an extended period of time has catastrophic effects on a human's actual health. That's just the first negative thing about going to Mars. Next up, we got radiation. Radiation is something completely different too. But like a long-term stay on Mars would be catastrophic to your health. We always see in sci-fi movies, though, that ships always have gravity. If you've seen Passengers, if you've seen Star Wars, there's gravity on these ships where they can walk, you know? I don't think we understand gravity enough yet to create an artificial gravitational field. But if we did, then we wouldn't have these problems. And I don't even know if it's possible. We don't even know how gravity works. So it looks like we're just gonna have to deal with the side effects until then. Because of so much radiation reaching Mars' surface, the planet has lost its inner dynamo despite its far distance from the sun compared to Earth. Due to this, Mars has a weaker global magnetosphere than Earth does. Once again, we talked about that. And combined with a thin atmosphere, this permits a significant amount of ionizing radiation to reach the Martian surface. So even though Mars is farther away, because it doesn't have an atmosphere like Earth's or a magnetosphere, these particles are still getting in there. There's so many things that can go wrong, so many things that have to happen. We have to refill a ship in space to get there and then refill it to get back. The physical side effects, the radiation, the atmosphere, the magnetosphere. So many things are saying humans cannot do this. We must stay on Earth. We cannot go to a different planet. But despite all of these things, we haven't even gotten to the actual colony yet. Meaning humans who arrive on Mars, once they bypass all this other stuff, they live on Mars. They grow plants, theoretically, grow food, have animals, theoretically, right? Because one day we need an actual colony, basically probably 1700s type living, I would think, with a few computers here and there. Because there's natural resources, but there's no wood on Mars. There's a bunch of rock. There's a bunch of elements, right? But there isn't any wood where we could just build log cabins. We could build stone houses. We could get supplies shipped from Earth, but there isn't many natural resources. Like there can't be any fossil fuels because there haven't been any dinosaurs on Mars that we know of. There isn't any water. There isn't any ice. There isn't any air. You know what I mean? There's so many questions that go into this. And it would be one thing to terraform a planet into Earth, but it'd be a completely another thing to actually live there and survive there. And I'm thinking if we go to Mars in 2030, it would be completely livable and travelable, meaning I could hop on a SpaceX shuttle tomorrow, arrive at Mars in 6 months, stay there for a month or two, film a couple of vlogs, meet some people, jump into a Martian ravine because it's not going to hurt as bad when I land, theoretically, and come back in 6 months. A year and a half of my life is gone, but I went to a different planet and I probably paid $400 to get there, right? Because eventually the traveling from Earth to Mars would become recreational and commercial. It would basically turn into a plane flight. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because if we leave in 2030 to start this colony, and then whenever I would be able to do all that stuff, it would probably be, if everything went right, I would assume that would be an early possibility. I don't know anything about science, but from a common sense point of view, it would probably be 2,700, 2,800. And I think that's kind of lowballing it. I think it might be longer than that, maybe even 3,100, 3,200. It could be sooner, but I definitely don't think it'll be in our lifetime. That's for sure. 2030 to 2,700, 670 years, almost 700. I think the math is right. I'm stupid if it's wrong, not my fault. But so yeah, boys, if you have any dreams of living on Mars, throw it out the window because it's not happening anytime soon. Unless Elon invents Neuralink and we can transfer our entire consciousness into a computer right here. We'd be chilling, we'd be immortal, but I don't think that'll happen either. So yeah, by the time I'm 80, Mars will probably have 100 people living there, or have 100 people who have touched down on Mars and came back. I guarantee the terraforming stuff will begin on Mars, but I don't think there's any way people will be living on Mars in my lifetime. They could. I just feel like there's a lot of problems they gotta sort through first, you know? To be self-sustaining though, a colony would have to be large enough to provide all the necessary living services. These include ecosystem management, producing appropriate gases, controlling air composition, pressure, and temperature, collecting and producing water, growing food, and processing organic waste, meaning, you know what I mean. Energy production. This includes extracting methane for vehicles, and if photovoltaic cells are used to produce energy, this would include the extraction and processing of silicates to augment or replace any original equipment. Okay, so methane for vehicles. I've heard of methane gas, and it's toxic for us to breathe in. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe gas isn't only fossil fuels. I'm pretty sure it was. But I know there's other ways to produce it, obviously, right? But I think methane might be naturally occurring in our solar system in space on Earth here. Let me look that up. It occurs naturally in the environment, okay? Okay, so methane is on Mars, and it is naturally producing. For some reason, I've had this thought that cars only get their gas and we only get our oil from fossil fuels. Maybe that's not true. I don't know how that all works. Industry. So we talk about ecosystem management, energy production. Now industry. Extracting and processing appropriate ores, manufacturing tools and other objects, producing clothes, medicine, glass, ceramics, plastics, all that. Building. Even if the base is constructed before arrival, it will need frequent adaptation according to the evolution of the settlement, as well as inevitable replacement. If it is constructed before we get there, of course, it's going to need a few tune-ups, need to have this done to it. Social activities. This includes raising children and educating them, healthcare, preparing meals, cleaning, washing, organizing the work and making decisions, time for sports, culture and entertainment. Interesting, right? Basically creating an entire Earth-like civilization on Mars. I know there's a little TV show, I think, or a movie about a kid born on Mars and he falls in love with somebody on Earth. Imagine being the first kid born on Mars. Healthcare, preparing meals, cleaning, washing, you know what I mean? Sports, culture, entertainment. That's a lot, dude. That's a lot. Because obviously you need all of these things to have a livable colony on Mars, right? You need ecosystem management, energy production, industry, building, social activities, all these things. But if we haven't terraformed Mars completely, if the atmosphere still isn't breathable, we have to go outside to get that natural vitamin D through a spacesuit. You would need a pretty large facility, right? We're talking the little domes, right? Oxygen, kind of like a space station, I guess, on Mars. You would need time for people to play sports, to do exercises, to do school, hospitals, meal prep, washing, all these things, you know? And that seems damn near impossible, all inside of one little dome building. Could work, right? I just don't think it'll be anytime soon. As the number of individuals grows, both activities and objects can be shared between them. Growth will also offset the collapse of the society, caused by sudden deaths, accidents, infertility, or inbreeding. But this may not prevent mortal combat between groups of individuals or the loss of efficiency due to inappropriate social organization. Mortal combat, bro. We'll be living in the Wild West again. You got to think about that, right? Would they take guns to Mars? Would they have a president? Would they be under the United States Constitution? Would they be under the Russian Constitution, whatever it is? China Constitution? Would we create a new country on Mars? The Mars Republic, right? How would these things work? Would there be a jail? Because you still got human nature to deal with, you know? There's still going to be those people who want power. There's still going to be those people who are greedy. There's still going to be the people who only care about themselves, don't care about supporting everyone else. If you send scientists and activists to Mars first off, sure, they'll care about it. But generations after that, who's going to care, right? Is there going to be a Martian president? All these questions. And like, you wouldn't think about that, you know? You would just think about living on Mars, but you wouldn't think about all the societal things that comes with it. By mathematical modeling of the time spent by people on these issues and by keeping things simple, Salati, I think he's a scientist, concludes that the minimum number for a colony on Mars is 110. This is close to other studies of the genetic problems involving the longer journey to Proxima Centauri b. The minimum number for a colony on Mars is 110. And I think by him saying that is that the people who are sent to Mars needs to be 110. Because you can't send 10 people to Mars. You know, you can send 10 people to Mars, 5 women, 5 men. Obviously, reproduction is going to happen, right? But you can't only have 10 people reproducing because eventually you're going to get some inbreeding. You're going to turn into the old kings of England and start growing tails. And it just wouldn't be good to start a new colony, you know? So minimum 110 people. 110 divided by 2, what is that? 65? I got to check my math, bro. I got to check my math. I better not be wrong. It's 55. I'm so awful at math. Anyways, we'll keep that. 55 men, 55 women. Maybe that's enough genetic diversity to not create inbreeding and create genetic mutations, hopefully, you know? There's just so many problems that could go wrong. That's it. So many things could go wrong. What would we need, though, exactly to be able to live there? Basic utilities, oxygen, power, local communications, waste disposal, sanitation, and water recycling. Habitats, storage facilities, workspaces, airlock for pressurization and dust management, resource extraction equipment, initially for water and oxygen, later for a wider cross-section of minerals, building materials, etc., equipment for energy production and energy storage, some solar and perhaps nuclear as well. Hold the phone here. Equipment for energy production and energy storage, some solar and perhaps nuclear as well. Why would we need nuclear equipment for Mars colonization? Nuclear reactors are one thing, but if humans bring nukes to Mars, bro, we will clearly have learned nothing because we already have nukes on Earth. There's constant threats of World War III all the time. People are saying they're going to drop nukes everywhere. If we bring nukes to Mars, because one day imagine Mars is a civilization where we can just live. There's different countries, different factions, warring nations, whatever you want to call it, right? If we have nukes on Mars, dude, Mars is like our saving grace. Mars is a chance for humans to start over and build something better. Interplanetary species, evolve the human race, leave a legacy behind, conquer the universe. And we can't do that if we're exploding each other. You know what I mean? We just got to work together. So I swear to God, if they bring nukes to Mars, we're chucked. Final straw for humanity. That's all I'm saying. But so apparently they're saying the path to actually being able to have a colony that survives on Mars, there would be precursor robotic systems. First off, obviously we have Mars rover Spirit, Opportunity, Curiosity, and Perseverance. We've all seen them. Little Martian rovers that drive around, vibe out, help humanity. You know what I mean? The pioneers in Martian exploration, basically, right? But basically, if we sent more robots there, these systems could help locate resources such as groundwater or ice, because there is water on Mars, maybe. I think I said there wasn't earlier, but they might have found water. I honestly don't know. That would ultimately help a colony grow and thrive. The lifetimes of these systems could be years or even decades. And as recent developments in commercial spaceflight have shown, it may be that these systems will involve private as well as government ownership. So these robotic systems also have a reduced cost compared with early crewed operations and have less political risk. Less political risk. God, we love politics, don't we? Less political risk. We're talking about colonizing a new planet. And we still need to worry about political risk. Unbelievable. I just want world peace, that's all. But see, look, here's some possible locations for settlements. So everything I've seen has always been that they're going to live in little domes, you know, kind of like imagine Sandy's dome in Bikini Bottom from SpongeBob. That's an awful reference, right? But right here it's saying caves would naturally provide a degree of insulation from Martian hazards for human on the planet. These include radiation, impactor events, and the wide range in temperatures on the surface, and also the Mars demons. I'm just kidding. That's not actually there. It was a joke. Mars Odyssey found what appeared to be natural caves near the volcano Arsia Mons. So with caves could come lava tubes. So we're talking about building in the actual surface of Mars, living inside of a cave. That'd be interesting. That'd be a lot better for insulating oxygen. And maybe I just haven't been thinking outside the box. It would honestly probably be better to live underground, you know, because it's a lot easier to keep oxygen in, less radiation underground, and maybe, you know, turn into District 13 or something. Let's see, here we go into ethical, political, and legal challenges. It is unforeseen how the first human landing on Mars will change the current policies regarding the exploration of space and occupancy of celestial bodies. In the 1967 United Nations Outer Space Treaty, it was determined that no country may take claim to space or its inhabitants. Okay, since the planet Mars offers a challenging environment and dangerous obstacles for humans to overcome, the laws and culture on the planet will most likely be very different from those on Earth. With Elon Musk announcing his plans for travel to Mars, it is uncertain how the dynamic of a private company possibly being the first to put a human on Mars will play out on a national and global scale. NASA has to deal with several cuts in funding, and during the presidency of Barack Obama, the objective for NASA to reach Mars was pushed to the background. In 2017, President Donald Trump promised to return humans to the moon and eventually Mars, effectively taking action by increasing NASA budget with $1.1 billion. And space colonization in general has been discussed as a continuation of imperialism and colonialism, especially regarding Mars colonial decision-making and reasons for colonial labor. And land exploitation have been questioned with post-colonial critique, seeing the need for inclusive and democratic participation and implementation of any space and Mars exploration, infrastructure, or colonization. Many have called for dramatic sociological reforms and guarantees to prevent racism, sexism, and other forms of prejudice. Obviously, these things would have to be there. We're already civilized here. Even though we all argue, we're still civilized, you know? So these would just have to be a must. There should not be any forms of prejudice on a new planet, that's for sure. That is the last thing anyone needs. But imperialism and colonialism, I'm not going to cap, I don't remember exactly what these words mean, but basically what they just said, it would very much be essential and a necessity for pity human politics, pity human prejudice, pity human greed, all these things, you know, pity human nature, basically. It's just, we got to become above ourselves. Right? We can't bring, obviously human nature is still going to follow, but it is essential to not bring the negatives of human nature to a new planet when we already have these other challenges, right? And that's going to be hard to do, obviously, but because human nature always gets in the way. But we just got to live for the greater good before ourselves, because anyone who's going to go to Mars to help set this up is obviously thinking about the future and the greater good of humanity, not their own personal gain. And that's what I think the main focus should be. And now that all this is happening, that treaty's an alliance or whatever that's still there, it makes me curious who, or not who, what the country would be named on Mars. You know, maybe like I said, Mars Republic. It's like a whole different sci-fi world. I wrote a short story about World War III happening. Humans were already colonized on a different planet, and the main character left Earth as soon as it got bombed, and they were going to that new planet. But I might write a short story about Mars now, just because it's cool to fantasize about that. So if you don't know, SpaceX is ran by the god Elon Musk. Elon Musk recently bought Twitter. He owns Tesla. He owns a Boring Company. He owns Neuralink, trying to make us into robots. And he's basically a real life Iron Man. He owns like 7 companies, and one of them is SpaceX, right? And SpaceX has government federal contracts. They currently have satellites above Earth that has, I think, new age information technology or something. They're using the satellites to help Ukraine, I think, in the war. And so they're just kind of revolutionizing space a little bit, you know? And so SpaceX is the biggest one I've heard talk about colonization of Mars. So we're going to go on their website and see exactly what they say and how they'll do it and some of the cool things they've said. Because I've heard that he plans on creating oxygen into Mars' atmosphere. And that's kind of hard, you would think, right? You just create oxygen. If you watch The Martian, I guess he did it there. Obviously a movie. But anyways, why Mars, first off, right? At an average distance of 140 million miles, Mars is one of Earth's closest habitable neighbors. Mars is about half again as far from the sun as Earth, so it still has some decent sunlight. It is a little cold, but we can warm it up. Its atmosphere is primarily CO2 with some nitrogen and argon and a few other trace elements, which means that we can grow plants on Mars just by compressing the atmosphere. Gravity on Mars is about 38% of that of Earth, so you would be able to lift heavy things and bound around. Furthermore, the day is remarkably close to that of Earth. So the atmosphere is mainly CO2. We breathe out carbon dioxide, right? Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and then breathe out oxygen. So if you compress the atmosphere on Mars, I guess that's what he's saying, right? Because I think Earth's atmosphere is like 73% nitrogen, 18% oxygen or something like that, some few trace elements. So like we breathe in a lot of nitrogen anyway, right? I think, I'm gonna look that up just to get a fact check. So Earth's atmosphere is 21% oxygen. So we breathe in oxygen, but it doesn't seem to be that we need 100% oxygen because ours is only 21%. We're all living fine, right? Unless you have asthma, but that's a different story. But to compress the CO2 on Mars, plant some plants, get them growing, have them breathe in the CO2, have them release oxygen. Eventually after, I'm sure that'd take thousands of years though, maybe millions, have that release enough oxygen to be livable and breathable. I don't know exactly how he plans to have that happen, but I guess you could use plants, right? How long would it take us humans to get to Mars? Well, let's look. 6 months to get to Mars. Mars also has 2 moons and it has 14 orbiting satellites. 6 months. I think it takes 3 days to get to the moon, but 6 months to get there. That's a long time in space. Going about 5 miles a second. That's a long time. And you have to wait exactly too, because like the orbit of Mars and Earth is a little skewed. So the only way we can get to Mars sometimes is when Mars is in the perfect location of orbit, I think. Because you can't just launch it when Mars is over here and then Earth's over here, you know what I mean? You got to wait until it's perfect, I think. That's what he was saying. I don't know. I looked that up a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly. But the plan to get to Mars is a little 6-step plan. The Starship, first off, is the vehicle they plan on using. Starship will be the world's most powerful launch vehicle ever developed, with the ability to carry in excess of 100 metric tons to Earth orbit. Drawing on an extensive history of launch vehicle and engine development programs, SpaceX has been rapidly iterating on the design of Starship with orbital flight targeted for 2020. I think he launched it last year, a couple years ago, and I think it blew up. But there's always trial and error with these things. Doesn't mean it's just broken, means it needs some more testing, you know? But together, the Starship spacecraft and Super Heavy rocket create a reusable transportation system capable of an orbit refueling and leveraging Mars' natural H2O and CO2 resources to refuel on the surface of Mars. So basically, he's saying with the Starship, it's able to be reusable and refuelable. And he's also saying that we can use CO2 and water in Mars' atmosphere to power the vehicle to get back to Earth. That's next level stuff. So first off, they would launch the booster and then return, meaning the launch vehicle would return back to Earth after the rocket is actually in space. Ship arrives in Earth's orbit, right? Tankers refuel ship and return to Earth. So he plans on lifting the rocket into space, sending tankers up there to refuel the ship while it's already in space, and then having that same refueling ship return to Earth. I don't think that's ever been done before in space travel, literally ever. I'm pretty sure that the first stage of the rocket always comes back down to Earth, and the vehicle just goes wherever it's going, right? It's never been refueled in space, so that's interesting. Then the refilled ship travels to Mars. Ship refilled on Mars using local resources, so once again, it's refilled again on Mars. Ship performs Mars ascent and direct return to Earth. So basically, he's going to launch it from Earth, have the first stage come back, go up there, refuel it, have it land on Mars, have it refueled again and come back. I heard him talking about some way to create fuel on Mars. I don't remember exactly. We'll get into that later. It's a pretty interesting take on the whole thing anyway. Starship leverages tanker vehicles. Essentially the Starship spacecraft minus the windows to refill the Starship spacecraft in low Earth orbit prior to departing for Mars. Refilling on orbit enables a transport of up to 100 tons all the way to Mars. And if the tanker ship has high reuse capability, the primary cost is that of the propellant, and the cost of oxygen and methane is extremely low. Starship will enter Mars' atmosphere at 7.5 kilometers per second and decelerate aerodynamically. The vehicle's heat shield is designed to withstand multiple entries, but given that the vehicle is coming into Mars' atmosphere so hot, we still expect to see some ablation of the heat shield, similar to wear and tear on a brake pad. The engineering video below simulates the physics of Mars entry for Starship. So just because we're here, I'm actually going to watch this video, react to it on this podcast, see what it's about, and see how they plan to do this exactly. Watch the simulation. So 48 seconds, 15 times real time velocity. They got a bunch of math here that I don't understand, but hyperbolic entry at up to 7.5 kilometers per second. That is fast. It's going in, it's landing, I think. That's what it's doing. It's turning. It's gonna go down here in a sec. I believe that's Mars' like surface, I think, right? Boom, it turns upwards, and that's when it turns around and the rockets like start firing. Over 99% of energy removed aerodynamically, supersonic retro propulsion for landing burn. So yeah, that's right. They say it's going to enter Mars' atmosphere, I think at a downward angle almost, with the front facing down. And then as soon as it gets to the bottom, the rockets are going to ignite and it's going to turn it around so it lands right side up. Very interesting. I think that saves fuel too. Kind of like a last second diversion of gravity almost. And now that we see how we get there, I think the next two biggest questions would be how would we survive on Mars? And of course, how would we create oxygen to eventually be able to walk outside of little glass domes and become a true multiplanetary species by being able to live there? So some of the proposed methods and strategies, first off, here we go. We got one right here. Terraforming Mars would entail three major interlaced changes: building up the magnetosphere, building up the atmosphere, and raising the temperature. So magnetosphere, I assume, is Earth's magnetic field that gets rid of sun rays and everything else and just kind of helps us, right? So we need to create that on Mars. Atmosphere, obviously livable, breathable air. Temperature, so we don't freeze or die. The atmosphere of Mars is relatively thin and has a very low surface pressure. Because its atmosphere consists mainly of CO2, a known greenhouse gas, once Mars begins to heat, The CO2 may help to keep thermal energy near the surface. Moreover, as it heats, more CO2 would enter the atmosphere from the frozen reservoirs on the poles, enhancing the greenhouse effects, similar to how Earth actually got its atmosphere. This means that the two processes of building the atmosphere and heating it would augment each other, favoring terraforming. However, it would be difficult to keep the atmosphere together because of the lack of a protective global magnetic field against erosion by the solar wind. So solar wind comes in, right? If there's no magnetic field, it's going to tear apart the atmosphere. That's why ours is still good, because we have the magnetic field. So I don't know exactly how they would create a magnetic field on Mars, Let's dive into that one first. The solution with the lowest power assembly and mass is to create an artificial charged particle ring, similar in form to a radiation belt, around the planet, possibly formed by ejecting matter from one of the moons of Mars, in a fashion similar to that which forms the Jupiter Io plasma torus, but using electromagnetic and plasma waves to drive a net current in the rings that results in an overall magnetic field. Are they talking about exploding one of Mars' moons? I think there's a few different ways they probably do this. It's just one of the theories. And I don't exactly know how electromagnets work anyway, you know what I mean? Or a magnetic field. So let's just see how we'd create an atmosphere. One method of augmenting the Martian atmosphere is to introduce ammonia. Large amounts of ammonia are likely to exist in frozen form on minor planets orbiting in the solar system. It might be possible to redirect orbits of these to smaller ammonia-rich objects so that they can collide with Mars, thereby transferring the ammonia into Martian atmosphere. Ammonia is not stable in the Martian atmosphere, however. It breaks down into diatomic nitrogen and hydrogen after a few hours. Though ammonia is a powerful greenhouse gas, it is unlikely to generate much planetary warming. Presumably, the nitrogen gas would eventually be depleted by the same processes that strip Mars of much of its original atmosphere. So they're saying they're going to take a smaller planet in the solar system and throw it into Mars to get ammonia there. That's one way, I guess, right? But it was also saying that one of the big things they'd have to worry about is the nitrogen leaving and the atmosphere not being protected. One, because of the magnetic sphere around it, but also, I guess that's just what happens. One key aspect of terraforming Mars is to protect the atmosphere from being lost in space. Some scientists hypothesize that creating a planet-wide artificial magnetosphere would be helpful in resolving the issue. There we go. It is feasible to do that with current technology by building a system of refrigerated latitudinal superconducting rings. Refrigerated latitudinal superconducting rings. Artificially? Are we talking about building an artificial ring around Mars? I feel like that's a lot of resources and a lot of time we don't have. I feel like that'd take hundreds of years, low key. Mars is huge. But now I think we talked about how they'll get there, civilization, all that, the pros and cons of it all, how they're going to survive, the different ways they could survive, politics, ethics, all that stuff. But the main thing is the terraforming. We talked about the atmosphere a little bit, the magnetosphere, but how are they going to create more oxygen? And how are they going to refuel Starship? So for the first issue, it says plasma reactors could create oxygen on Mars. They got a nice little picture here. It looks interesting. Last year, NASA achieved something science fiction writers have been dreaming about for decades. It created oxygen on Mars. A microwave-sized device attached to the agency's Perseverance rover converted carbon dioxide into 10 minutes of breathable oxygen. Now physicists say they've come up with a way to use electron beams in a plasma reactor to create far more oxygen, potentially in a smaller package. I did not know they did that. That's sick. So if they already did it off of a rover, they could definitely do it with a huge plasma reactor, obviously, right? They're going to name it Moxie. The device draws in Martian air, which is 95% carbon dioxide, what we breathe out, by pumping a current between two oppositely charged electrodes in an electrochemical cell. Moxie can split the carbon dioxide into carbon monoxide and oxygen ions. The oxygen ions then combine with each other to produce oxygen gas. This experiment has been a successful proof of concept, but to work, Moxie needs to pressurize and heat Martian air, requiring extra parts that consume energy and make it bulky. So basically they have these plasma reactors, build them big enough, have them split these carbon dioxide molecules into oxygen and monoxide, and then just combine the oxygen into oxygen gas, release that in the atmosphere, make it breathable, or just create more oxygen to breathe on your tube. I don't know, but I guess they did it already on Mars' atmosphere. It worked, 10 minutes of breathable air. So I guess they could do it more. They estimate the device could create about 14 grams of oxygen per hour. That's a lot of oxygen. I just can't imagine oxygen in a physical form, like a solid. Enough to support 28 minutes of breathing. So every 1 hour of oxygen creation, you get 28 minutes of breathable air. And so now that we got that out of the way, how are we going to refuel the ship to get back to Earth? The fuel for Starship is simple methane, because I guess it's easily produced on Mars. And the propellant is liquid oxygen. Methane is CH4, 4 hydrogen atoms and a carbon atom. Looking at the composition chart above, carbon is readily available and is the oxygen for the propellant. The missing element is hydrogen. Okay, There are two ways to get the hydrogen available for the methanation operation to produce fuel. The first way is to simply bring it along the hydrogen as part of the payload. The hydrogen is roughly 25% the molecular mass of methane, so this amounts to bringing 1/4 the mass of the total fuel along. Hydrogen production on Mars. The other approach is to produce it on the Martian surface. The payload value of this is obviously huge, but committing to doing this is risky in a way that the carbon and oxygen production is not. Producing oxygen for propellant and life support is solid oxide electrolysis. Interesting. And then it just talks about some numbers, but basically they say there are ways to create oxygen, hydrogen, and methane all on the Martian surface. Oxygen to breathe, just like the other one was talking about, but also methane to fuel and propel you back to Earth. And I assume these would have to be huge reactors. It's constantly producing oxygen and methane along with other life support systems and basically everything constantly going. We'd obviously need nuclear reactors, right? Solar panels, literally anything we could do for energy. And I don't know what else. Maybe they'll discover some other form of energy that works on Martian surface that doesn't work here. I don't know. Crazy to think about. I'm sure in 900 years, Mars will be completely habitable. That's a long ways away. But we're pioneers, boys. We're pioneers to this. Anyway, so I think that's about it. If you guys did enjoy this episode, let me know down below in the comments. If you're on Spotify, thank you for listening once again. If you're not on Spotify and want to listen on Spotify, that link is down below. Instagram, the Discord server, also down below. Subscribe to never miss a video like this. It's only going to continue to get lit. This is the 4th episode. We got big things still coming. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Chillin' with Dylan. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.